riots or things of that nature. To open up the open mic session, which would be a chance for people to share their thoughts on changes that they would like to see in the community. So we're going to split this into two parts. We're specifically going to talk about Mayor Wheeler's 19-point plan at a separate section. So we'll reserve this first part to just talk about police reform, however you want to call it. Maybe it's not reform. Maybe you want to see other changes or things of that nature. So we'll do that. But we're going to start by hearing from a number of individuals, a couple distinguished guests to kind of center this conversation. And I believe 3 of them are on the call. We're going to start with Senator Lou Fredericks. I want to thank him for being here. And then we'll go next with Dr. Markeisha Smith. And then I believe Donna Hayes is also here as well. So I just want to thank them for being on the call. Senator, you're up first. And thank you for being here.
Sure, thank you for inviting me. I appreciate that. I've been spending.
Hello, that's my senator.
Hello, Ann. I've been spending an awful lot of time on Zoom calls around this particular issue, around these issues. I think that, and I just for those who I'm promoting it, I might as well sort of toot my own horn. There's an article that I just wrote for an op-ed for the Tribune that just came out just this afternoon. So you might take a look at that as well to give you a sense of where I'm coming from on these issues. It is at the state level, we're going to be looking at a number of proposals and plans and bills. They will come in a series of waves. The first wave will be part of a special session, probably coming up at the end of this month. The next wave is probably a separate special session, we hope, and then certainly in the 2021 legislative session, you should see a number of bills dealing with the issues that we've been struggling with for quite a while, but most specifically over the last 2 weeks. So I would encourage you to take a look at what those proposals are and how they intersect with the city's and with the mayor's proposals. Some of them do, most of them do, but there's an aspect of these issues that are state. You have to deal with at a state level, but we can support what's going on at the city level, and that's my proposal. That's my plan, is to be able to be a support system and create a new atmosphere, a new concept of how we're dealing with public safety generally, and how we're dealing with a switch from a law enforcement approach to the policing, to a peace officer approach to policing. I'm not sure how specific you wanted me to go.
No, that's perfect, Senator Fredericks. Unless there's any other comments you had about the work you're doing or how people could support that work, or if they have, yeah.
Well, I will say this in terms of supporting the work. I've said this for years, and it's even more true now. We already have a pretty clearly a situation in Portland where there's a critical mass of people moving forward. What we need to do is to have people who are part of other groups around the state talking with their elected officials, all of the elected officials, not just the legislators, but the mayors, the school board members, the soil and water district people, the county commissioners, et cetera. They need to be talking with those officials about how important this is. So if you have friends or relatives, I always say, if you're in a faith community or if you're in a stamp collecting group, try to make sure that you are in fact talking with your friends and saying, this is the concern that we have, because they need to understand that the relationships and the affiliations that they have are concerned about these issues. And so if you have the ability to talk with those affiliations, please do it. Call them, talk with them. You're not going to convert them necessarily. What you're saying is, I'm concerned about this. I wanted you to know about it. So the next time someone says, well, nobody else has talked with me about it, you can say, yeah, you have. So that's important.
Thank you, Senator, and thank you for being here tonight. Next, we have Dr. Markeisha Smith, who is the Director of the Office of Equity and Human Rights for the City of Portland, which is the office which the Portland Committee on Community Engaged Policing, this committee, is located. Dr. Smith, thank you for being here with us tonight.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you for giving me just a little bit of time to share some thoughts. It's great to see everybody. So just kind of briefly, I have shared a lot about what has been happening over the last 2 or 3 weeks. And I think one of the things that's really important to me as I think about what the role of the Office of Equity and Human Rights is in all of this is that we really speak the truth.
Yes.
And that we be very authentic about what happened.
So we need to get you out here.
Hang on one second. Sorry, Sue, thank you.
Okay, no worries. And I think that we have to think about how are we positioned as a city office? How are our employees who work in a variety of different bureaus, how are they showing up around this? And so I've really been issuing a challenge to my fellow bureau directors and the work that they're doing to think about what this means, right, in terms of our services and supports as a city. I think one of the things that's really clear is that our Black employees have a much different experience as employees for the city of Portland. And so I've taken some time, a couple of times now, to bring them together, and I've facilitated some conversation with them. And what's clear is they're hurting, and the response that they need from leadership in the city really has to be very loud, very strong. And at this point, we have to be pretty unapologetic about what it is that we need to see happen. And so being unapologetic about that, I'm in spaces and I'm really saying, this is a moment in time where we can't continue to do things in the same way that we've always done them. That's not gotten us anywhere. And as Lakiana, thank you so much for the moment of silence earlier. As I'm looking at the news, I am, it's like you can't take a breath without something else happening, right? We can't sort of blink. You open your eyes and there's something else that's playing out before us. And these things have been happening, right? These atrocities have been happening since the history of our people in this country. What is unique now is that we have social media and we have our smartphones and we have a way in which to record those stories. And you know, it's in front of the public now. And so there's no hiding, right? Things are right here. They're in front of us. We're seeing these things play out. And so if we don't take this opportunity to heed the call, then you know, this work is in vain. I know for me, who, you know, I show up and this is personal and professional for me. And so if I'm not using my voice now, then I'm not doing what it is that I believe I was called to do in this moment in time. And so I'm happy for this body of folks that is coming together continually, right? Even before we were, you know, in the trauma of what we're experiencing over the last 2 weeks, but have been coming together and have been pushing around police reform and thinking about what policing looks like, particularly for our Black community and other communities of color. And so I'm just grateful and indebted to you for your time and energy and expertise in this space. And I want you to know that our office is willing and able to help you in whatever way, shape, or form we need to. So that is my commitment to you. So thank you. I'll leave it there.
Thank you, Dr. Smith. Appreciate you being here. We are going to open it up to questions and to our open mic portion of this town hall. We do have Dr. Smith on for, I think, a couple more minutes, and then Senator Fredericks, maybe for the whole time, maybe for just partial of it. So I want to allow people to either ask them questions or just dive right into their thoughts or questions around two key questions I want to pose. What changes would you like to see the Portland Police Bureau make, and what role would you like to see PCCEP play in all of this? As we do center Black voices in this conversation, I want to invite people who identify as Black or African American to ask the first questions or make their statements. If you can use the hand raise function in your chat, or if you can't, you can just say, I have a question, and we'll get you up there. Okay, I see Zainab has a question. If you want to unmute, you have the floor.
Hi, thank you. I thought you said that Donna Haynes was going to speak, and I was just waiting to see if that.
Yeah, don't think she's on the call unless she is. I don't see her on here. We were
Okay,
hoping to
well,
speak.
my name is Zainab Folk, and I'm actually a native of Portland, Oregon, and I found out about PCCEP through Donna Haynes' Facebook page. And I came just to see, what was happening in Portland. And I guess perhaps I missed something in the beginning, but you introduced the co-chairs of this committee, and are they actually both men or male co-chairs? And so
Yes.
my question is, how diverse and inclusive is PCCEP? And then when you say it's centered around Black voices, who's missing at the table? Who's missing from the conversation? And I'm trying to really restrain my
Speak your truth.
I struggle with this because my truth is of a Portlander who was a part of the Black Liberation Movement and protesting policing back in 1980s. When you talked about Lloyd Tony Stevenson, understanding, that to me was my first understanding of someone being killed by the police. And so I struggle with this because while I don't live in Portland, I do work and I contribute to my community. And I'm wanting to, have others participate and understand more, but I wanted to check out PCCEP first before I don't want to bring more trauma to others. And so I just wanted to learn more about PCCEP, but I also wanted to just have you guys done your own internal check. Values are great, but when I don't see equity, when I don't see, diversity and inclusiveness, especially I want to see Black voices. I really expected Donna Haynes to be here to share her truth because she was the one who brought truth to me and understanding that this group actually exists. So I share this because I really want to see change, but I also want those who are stepping up as leaders to push that change and actually do it in a very methodical and practical way, I guess. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing that. Really important question. I'll let Andrew jump in here in a second and answer part of it. But the short answer to your question, Black women are missing on this committee. We had a Black co-chair at the beginning of this committee, and when she left, there was, I want to say, 3 Black women on this committee when the committee started, and there 3 or 4, and they have not been replaced. The process of getting alternates on board, for those of you who are not familiar with it, like it's 13 members, there's 2 youth seats, and then if someone rotates off board or resigns, then we have an alternate pool of people who have to, they have to interview, and then we have to vote on them. And so one of our challenges has been maintaining that pool. And when PCCEP was created, there were Black community organizers that did really intentional work to make sure that it was very representational. We haven't been able to sustain that. So that's what I'll say about that. So that's what's missing. As far as our steering committee, it's for men. And the original incarnation of it was 2 women and 2 men. So it needs to change in that regard. And then for our subcommittees, we have 4 of them, and 3 out of those 4 are women, and women of color for at least 2 of them. But I also realize that, you know, when I look at organizations, it's not enough just to say women of color or people of color on that committee. I want to see Black voices specifically. As a Black man, I want to see that on there. So that's what I'll say to that. And I would welcome any thoughts as to how you could see us growing that. And I'll also open it up to any other PCCEP members who would want to also chime in on that. But I think that is an essential question. And I also don't want you to feel like you have to censor yourself or apologize for anything you're saying.
Yeah.
So,
Sorry.
can I say
Go ahead. Of course.
as a black woman and a person who was raised and grew up and went to school in Oregon, college, graduating, I know there's a lot of Black women who would love to be a part of something if it's open to them, if it's accessible to them. So I guess for me, start there, make it accessible, provide it to those out there who could be also interested. Again, I learned about it just by chance 2 days ago, by just strolling through Facebook. And I find that it's not hard to do. And I also commend that this actually exists. But let's not just stop, even people left or, you know, people have not been replaced. Let's not just stop there. We have to be more intentional, and we have to be more understanding and aware that if you're going to talk about Black-centered voices, let them be there. Have them there. Bring them there. And I appreciate it. Thanks again.
Yep, thank you.
Yes, thank you. And I just want to add one thing to Lakiana's comments, all of which I agree with, and that is that we seek diversity in many different forms in terms of the recruitment for PCCEP. As Judith mentioned in the chat, it's open to everyone, and we encourage anyone who's interested to apply. Specifically, we're looking for diversity not only on the basis of race, but also people with a lived experience of mental illness. That was one of the key charges of PCCEP when it was created, and a wide variety of professional backgrounds that speak to this work as well. So I put the link to the PCCEP member roster with all of our short bios in the chat as well. And you'll see that even though it's not apparent just from looking at us in Zoom, we come from a lot of different places. And I think we lean on each other very heavily, just as we lean on all of you, really, for wisdom and understanding and ideas and perspectives that we don't have personally. And so I really appreciate the question. We could always do better, and we will going forward. So thank you.
Okay. Your application online, I went there first, so believe me, I did all my research prior to even jumping onto this call, and your application had a deadline on it, so it appeared like your application was closed. So I would say just reopen it up, make sure that people know about it, and just, again, I plan on applying. So, and I'll plan on inviting others to apply as well. And so whoever's listening out there, if you're Black or you're someone who can bring a voice to it, apply as well. Thank you.
That's great. And yes, thanks for pointing that out. We will make that change right away.
Awesome. Okay, so by the way, so if you're just jumping in, we're reserving this front end space for Black community members to be the first to ask questions or to either PCCEP or about the policing in Portland, or to our 2 guests, Senator Fredericks and Dr. Smith. I see Mims has a hand raised. Mims is the Executive Director of the Coalition of Black Men. So Mims, thanks for being here.
Oh, thank you for inviting me. I just wanted to reiterate and really focus in on what the caller just said, because I think to a certain degree, what she said was a little bit dismissed with Andrew. So the United States was built on slavery, right? it accumulated its wealth and its power through the abuse of Black bodies. And when you look at policing in the United States, without a doubt, the people who are affected the most by bad policing are Black men. And so I understand that white people are diverse. No two people are the same. And we have different experiences. I think that society needs to hold spaces more for Black people until Black people are fully included in it. I think that what the caller was getting to was also culture. So, you know, I'm not quite sure, and I don't want to be presumptive, but what are the experiences of those Black people when they come into your space? Do you have trouble retaining them? Because that could speak very well to your culture. And so you want to make sure that that is, that when people speak, that they're heard. And so I just wanted to say that in hearing Andrew's response to the Black female caller, it seemed a little dismissive. And I felt like, to a certain degree, it was it was triggering for me, because too often I've had whites explain away things to me, as though my thoughts weren't based in logic. And so I would just say that I think that and we know that in solving Black people's problems, that we all benefit. Because Black people, they have mental illness, they have other disabilities, you know, and so as we address their issues, we all benefit. And so that's all I wanted to add.
I appreciate you. I appreciate that. And again, I was only adding to what Lakiana said. I fully agree with Lakiana. I think it would be great if we had the type of representation that we had at the beginning of PCCEP. I think that was really valuable. My only addition to what Lakiana said is that we also have a variety of goals for representation, and we never want to lose sight of the fact that we want to make sure that we do have a diversity, particularly a diversity of background when it comes to mental illness as well, given what PCCEP's ultimate responsibility is in our charter. That was my only real addition. But thank you. I appreciate the call out.
Right, and I will reiterate too that Blacks have mental illness as well. And so it's not necessarily an either or. And I guess for me, like I said, it's a little bit triggering when I hear you juxtapose the two, because they're not exclusive of each other. What I'm hearing is maybe an excuse in my mind, right? I'm not quite sure what your intent is, but I think the result is making more room for white people, by saying, mentioning mental illness as a separate category, when we're talking about Black voices.
Understood. I understand. Point well taken. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mims. I would like to point out too that Marcia Perez is the chair of the Racial Equity Subcommittee of PCCEP, and I think this would be a great discussion for that. We're having a meeting this Thursday at 5 p.m. on Zoom, so I think it'll be great to figure that out. And that's something that, you know, we're constantly working, and sometimes we work too hard and are not focused on who's at the table and replenishing those folks that are cycling off. I also do want to make a note. If you are having issues with anybody in this room, as far as people sending inappropriate messages, first of all, you will be blocked off of this call. And if you are experiencing that, if you could please let Theo or the PCCEP hosts know, because I've been getting some messages and I'm trying to respond to them, but also facilitate, and I don't want to miss that. But I also just want to reiterate that this is a safe space, and if people are doing that, you will be blocked. But if you need help with that, please send them to Theo, who's raising his hand now.
Or Judith or Claudia can help too.
Thank you. Can I just add really quickly on behalf of the Racial Equity Subcommittee meeting, we are hosting it this upcoming Thursday, and I would love, if folks are interested in attending that, I would love to create the space for particularly Black women and hold that space and use that time to review some of the things that we were wanting to do. I think I've changed the agenda 17 times, and I'm totally happy to just hold this space. So feel free to email me or write me in the chat, and we'll get connected. So thank you for all of the feedback. It's really, really important.
Okay, next we're gonna go with Pastor Wisner. And again, this first part is we're holding space for Black folks to share their thoughts. So I appreciate people respecting that. Pastor Wisner, you're up.
I just wanted to add, maybe if I can make a suggestion, the concept of how PCCEP came together for all the viewers that first come in. I'm not sure if Senator Frederick is still on. I know Court is still on, but that might give a little more history in the background because I really enjoy what Mim said, especially where that the areas of what mental health and the difference. But knowing what PCCEP, how it was formed, and what you were saying from the beginning of the people of color and how the Department of Justice came in and the settlement. If Lou's there, if he's still on, maybe you or him can probably fill in some of that gap there for some of the people who are now on the call.
Well, I'm still here, Pastor. Thank you. Good to see you. This did not come about in a simple or quiet way. It involved federal efforts in the Department of Justice. It involved deaths by a number of folks because and the outrage surrounding those deaths and investigation surrounding those deaths. What we have here is an attempt to try to deal with how the community can be involved or can react to what has gone on in terms of violence, especially related to use of force by police officers to a number of groups. In particular, the initial effort was dealing with behavioral situations officially, but we were able to expand that into looking at the racial components and the disparities there. That has made a big difference. But this group has attempted to try to make a difference and be on the vanguard of looking at some of these things. It's been a struggle because for a number of people, it has not been able to sustain the interest, not so much the concerns, but the interest in terms of some of the political and the elected officials and community groups that we need to have. And I applaud you for continuing the effort despite that lack of support at times. So that's pretty much all I have to say about it.
Thank you, Senator. Pastor Weiser, does that answer your question or kind of bring to light what you were mentioning?
It does. And again, I was thinking that as the history and where it was, a lot of people may not know, those who have joined on the meeting today, how and what it is that this group is really working toward. I again agree with Senator Frederick. Appreciate all the turnovers of people who have put in a lot of time it's still a lot of work to go forward. But yes, it did. Thank you.
Yeah, and I do want to recognize two groups that have worked considerably on helping to get PCCEP to fruition, and since its fruition to continue to work with us, the Albina Ministerial Alliance and the Mental Health Alliance, for both of their work on this and continued work in that area. Any other Black folks would like to share something before I open the discussion up to other comments? Dustin, go ahead, brother.
I just had a question looking at the mayor's action plan, and I'm wondering if anyone can kind of answer this point number 15, where it says create local racial profiling ban with a private right of action for intentional discrimination by law enforcement. Like, does anyone know like what that looks like? I was just a little confused at that bullet point of like what that meant, and I was wondering if anyone here like could provide any kind of clarification about like what that looks like, what that ban looks like.
Yeah, we're actually going to jump into that in the second half of the meeting. So if you want to give us like maybe 20 minutes, about 6:15, we're going to jump into those questions specifically on that 19-point plan, and we'll bring that up as the first part of that.
All right, my bad. Thank you.
No, you're good. You're good. Other folks, Black folks who want to share thoughts, and then we're going to open it up to the rest of the community. I see Mark got his hand up there. Mark, go ahead.
Hello, everyone. My name's Mark Herrera. I've been in Portland for about a year and a half now. I'm on this call representing the NAACP to try to figure out how both our organizations can complement each other in this fight against injustice. And so that's what I'm really trying to gain from this meeting. I know we are gonna address the mayor's plan of action in the second half, but my main concern is that there are too many promises on that list. There are about 19 points, if that's correct. And as organizations, I think we really need to be careful on how to best track each and every of these promises to their fulfillment. So that's just my only concern with this plan, because it is a plan, and unfortunately plans tend to change a lot, and we have to be vigilant at this time because he put his name on this plan, this mayor, so it's not a contract. You feel me? It's not a contract whatsoever. So that's my only fear, is that there's gonna be a lot of backtracking. So both the NAACP and this organization really needs to come up with a way to monitor each and every step that this city is trying to take to combat injustice, which, you know, it's going to take a sweeping amount of reform and not just police reform.
Thank you. Appreciate that, Mark. And we'll dive into that again. I think that would be a perfect conversation with the NAACP. I know Marcy has been working hard to involve more community organizations in that. So I think that'd be a conversation to follow up with her on. And yeah, appreciate that. Other Black folks, last call before I open it up. And this is the general open mic session. We're going to have a whole part dedicated to the 19-point platform that Mayor Wheeler had put out. Okay, let's open that up to folks. If you can please use your raise hand function. These are comments, questions, thoughts. The two pieces that I kind of framed around it are what changes would you like to see the Portland Police Bureau make, and what role would you like PCCEP to take in that? I definitely appreciated hearing the internal questions, that reflection back on us that were raised earlier as well. So if you have thoughts on that, feel free to share that as well. But if you can use the hand raise function, or if you can't find it, just say I have a question and we'll get to you. Yes, it is. Oh, okay. Not seeing any hands, and then I did just get a question from a PCEP member. So Elliot, if you want to ask yours to the senator, go ahead.
Sure. I don't want to take away from the public's time, but Senator Frederick, first of all, thank you for your comments. Thank you for being here. Portland Cop Watch has raised to us on PCEP some concerns they have about the arbitration bill, and I'm not as familiar with it as either Portland Cop Watch or obviously yourself, but one of the problems they talk about, according to them, is that the bill only applies in cases where the arbitrator agrees misconduct occurred. And the reason they say most firings are overturned in serious cases is because arbitrators do not agree with the findings. So I'm wondering, is that the case? Is that still the true about the bill in the legislature? And if so, is there a way to deal with that problem?
Well, let me just say that I think I disagree with the interpretation of Cop Watch on this particular bill. So I mean, we can have that longer conversation on that. The bill is, it's clear to me that it is a bill that folks have been concerned about, and the support for it across the state. Remember that the bill passed unanimously from the Senate twice. That particular approach, and believe me, there were enough people who came forward. If there had been a loophole like that within it, we would have heard about it quite a while ago. We did not. The legal folks looked at things and said that this was something that they really wanted to work with the police chiefs, the Sheriff's Association, the cities, the counties. All of these folks were hoping for something to be able to deal with the arbitration issue, and they were pleased with what was brought up. So I believe that this is something that we can get through. We can get through the legislature quickly this time. If we find that in fact there are some problems in terms of the whole loopholes, we can go back and deal with that. But this is something I want to get done as quickly as possible in the short session that will be in the special short session that will be coming up. So that's what I'm looking at right now.
And as
somebody's got a whistle going on.
Yeah.
Right. Sorry.
As PCEP, is there any way we could support that effort?
It would be good for PCEP to point to if this is a concern. If PCEP could bring in a concern that would and talk about it that way, that would a letter, a note from PCEP would be helpful. But the concerns that PCEP has brought up, we're trying to address, because in my view, we've allowed the arbitrators to do way too much, and basically reverse a number of situations of use of force throughout the years, and we need to address that. So a letter from PCEP would be helpful. A letter from the organizations that are on this call, the different organizations on this call, would be helpful. Anything that we can have as a redundancy of support is always something that I would encourage as much as possible.
Well, thank you for your work on it.
Thank you for that. Ann Casper, you're up next. You're on mute.
Thank you. I was just letting the people in the house know I'm going to speak.
Hello?
Hello? Oh.
No, go ahead. You're right.
Okay, thank you. I have been here since day one for PCEP, and I just want to say I'm part of the mental health civil rights movement, and we're very excited to see what's happening with this other movement, and we're learning a lot from you. And I learned a lot last summer when we were at our mental health civil rights conference in Washington, D.C. We all got tickets to the African American Museum, and it was just incredible to see the history and watch that. And I just, Pastor Hardy's no longer on earth. I want to say hello to Mr. Barnett as well on the phone. It's really nice to hear that you're here. And I guess from the mental health viewpoint, don't forget about mental health. I've noticed.
Go ahead. There's a little technical difficulties that we're having.
Sure, it's fine. It's fine.
Right.
Thank you for helping me through.
Yep.
So just don't forget mental health. I've noticed that you've renamed your committee on mental health, behavioral health. Addictions and mental health are very, very different. And even the peer support and the peer mentor support is approached very differently. So I think it's great addictions is at the table. However, by putting us together, behavioral health is a term they started using years ago. That is a controlling term. And that comes from our civil rights, but we're not going to get in that today. Just to let you know, I would like to go back to mental health. And also, I was at the tables in 2006, 2007 with James Chassie and the police, and we worked a lot at those tables. So I'm going to encourage.
Go ahead.
Is this a Zoom bomb or something?
Yeah, there's some disruptors in it, but we're going to march right through it.
I apologize. I'm going to remove them quickly. Sorry.
I like the music. Why don't we have some music? It's good.
Yeah, we're keeping track of these. It seems like we're getting Zoom bombed.
Okay.
Trying to take care of it. Sorry, everyone.
It's all good. So just a little bit about the history. Pastor Harding and the Albino Ministerial Alliance, and I've gone to those meetings since the beginning of PCCEP before. And am I speaking? Can you hear me?
Yep, you're good.
Okay, I just saw a different sign. I wasn't sure if I'm speaking or not. Okay, so you can hear me. So we in the mental health civil rights movement have tried to work along with all of these groups, and there is a stigma there, and we haven't been able to work correct with them together, and I'm really sad about that, because personally I put a lot of hours into it, and I like all you people, but I feel that we're left behind. And just remember not to leave.
You doing, step bro?
Oh dear.
You're okay. Go ahead.
You can hear me? This is really funny, actually. I do TV shows, and I've never had this happen before in a TV show. In fact, I did a show with Lou Frederick, and I encourage you to watch it. And it's about his experience and his wife's experience with mental health in the systems here. I have been very personally concerned working in the mental health systems about Black people and the mental health systems.
Go ahead.
Okay. Maybe I should just take this up later sometime. But
no, we want you to continue and finish your thought.
Okay. Thank you. I've been personally concerned because working in the systems, being stuck in these systems, it's hard enough being blonde and blue-eyed, but being Black doesn't match up. I learned last summer at that conference there was a whole workshop on the racist background of psychiatry. I had no idea. So we have to be very careful with mental health and look forward. There's some Black mental health things that have come up in Portland, which Able Gordley Center, things like that, which is really good. However, it's not enough. When I am inpatient, when I work inpatient, when I'm inpatient, I watch my fellow Black peers, and that inpatient treatment doesn't match them whatsoever, is what I've observed. That's something to think about. Is the treatment healing? How do we all heal? And are these systems built to help Black people heal? Are these systems built to help any human heal? So looking at the systems, please, I encourage you, go back to mental health. Please go back. Don't forget us. And I know, speaking again, Pastor Harding and other pastors, at the first PCCEP meeting, the mental health people, we were not allowed to speak, even though it was about mental health. Bob Jundeff, the lawyer, was allowed to speak. What Bob did, he wrote to us. He said, what do I say? I know I'm not a peer. I know I'm not you. What do I say? We were given 5 minutes to speak. Everybody else was given a long, long time. Mental health and Black do go together. We all need to heal. So I encourage you, don't forget that. I see it's being forgotten. I see it being pushed back. And we were actually the people who was it COAB? So I wasn't part of that, but they had mental health groups actually vote on the COAB, who was going to be the COAB. And all of the people who are in the mental health groups and advising City Hall at that time said, don't hire any of these groups, they're not going to work. And guess what? It hasn't worked. And then watching the mental health.
And we have about 30 more seconds for your comments.
Got it. So no, oh, thank you. Thank you. I mean, do I get some more music in there too? I'm joking. So I just want to say, and also I have called, what's her name? Who started this meeting? I'm sorry, I forgot.
With Claudia?
Beginning of the, no, the beginning of the meeting, she was talking. I'm forgetting her name.
Oh, Amy?
No.
Judith
No,
Mallory.
Judith, I have called Judith Mallory 4 times in the past month through 823-4000. I've not got a call back. So Judith, if you could please call me back. I'm not sure if you're receiving my phone messages or not. It's about
Yeah,
PCCEP.
I'm not,
I'd
Ann, so
appreciate
thank you
that.
for mentioning
You're
it.
not. I just
I'm
I
not
didn't
gonna,
know.
I'm sorry.
Well, I've gone through your phone lines. I didn't know. So if you
Yeah,
could
I'm
call
gonna-
me, that'd be great.
Great, and I'm gonna send you my number through the chat box.
Okay, and also part of the ECIT training, I got a half hour of that to be in the police training, the peer movement, the history of the peer movement, and the history of us. So the police actually, it's great that they're getting educated, and the only people who are our allies, honestly, at City Hall for mental health are the police. It's so interesting to watch that. So as you're going on to the mayor's things like that, the mayor doesn't have anybody who's been in the systems at the table explain whether black or white about mental health. So please get us at the table and get us paid, because we can't afford to do this anymore. Thank you.
Yeah, but I appreciate your comments, really do. And we'll have time to follow up with those with folks. I see, I got your hand. Can't pronounce your name on there, but Jay, go ahead. And just for everybody, just try and keep your comments to about 2 to 3 minutes. If you need a little bit more time, just for your own sake, go ahead. But just so we can make sure to hear everybody. And Ann, thank you for sharing again.
Are you talking to me or somebody else?
Yeah, Jay, you're up. I didn't get your
I'm
first.
not Jay, I'm Mike. I'm sorry.
Okay, Mike.
I just switched to It's Mike Schumann. Anyways,
Ann, can you move? Oh, there we go. Perfect. Go ahead.
And I just have a fairly quick comment to Lou Frederick, because I'm with Portland Cop Watch, and we are not opposing the bill that you have in the legislature. We just would like to see it somewhat stronger, because it doesn't cover a lot of arbitrations where the facts got reversed by the arbitrator.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that, Jay. Mike,
I'm Mike Schumann.
You've got it's listed on the thing as Jay Shuey or something like that.
Jay Shuey is my wife's computer. I switched.
Okay, I got it. Thank you. I appreciate that. That's great. Good to know. And we can adjust that in the future. I want to make sure that we get this particular bill through, and then we can begin to look at other things. But the momentum right now is such that we can get something accomplished. I want to do that. It was stopped in the past by way of some, it was stopped in the past on a number of ways, but I think we can get this done for this, and I appreciate Cop Watch saying that. That helps a great deal. Thank you.
Okay. And that's not an official reaction because we haven't had a meeting, but I'm sure it will be.
Oh, thank you.
And let me say 2 more things and I'll get off. There are 2 more things that, from our perspective, at least from mine, need to happen. One is the police discipline guide, which I think is part of the reason that arbitration can't be reformed further is in the police discipline guide. There's a lot of language in there. And the other one that I know Dan Handelman really wants to do is the CRC IPR, the police review board. We would like to see that get some teeth so they could actually subpoena witnesses and have some effect.
Let me speak quickly to the discipline guide. The bill itself is set up to make sure that the discipline guide is part of the contract, and that is negotiated so that we understand just what discipline will be taken given particular situations where people have violated that. That's part of it. Some of the fight that we've had in the past has been whether that was going to be included in any negotiations, and I think it should be. The other thing, of course, is I'd like to see those negotiations open, but that's another bill altogether. And the second part, I'm sorry, I forgot the second part that you were talking about.
Citizens Review.
Citizens Review Board. It is one of the, pardon me, it's one of the list of bills. There is a cluster of bills that is related to police accountability. That is one of them, to find a way to support and allow a strong Citizens Review Board situation to take place across the state. That is also something that you're seeing, by the way, at the federal level with a number of bills in Congress. But the problem with the bills in Congress is that most of the bills that are being proposed in the House will probably pass. But when they get to the Senate, they won't even be considered, because that's the way that McConnell is running things. So we have to try to do some things at the state level. That's one of the things I hope we'll get a chance to do at the state level.
Thank you so much for answering my question.
Sure.
Appreciate that, both of y'all. Candace from the CRC, go ahead.
Hello, everyone. My name is Candace Avalos. I'm the acting chair of the Citizen Review Committee, or CRC. Obviously, we are talking about that because it is one part of the police accountability picture. And PCCEP, the Training Advisory Council, or TAC, and I are all planning on meeting tomorrow to just kind of get on the same page and see how we can be more collaborative on these efforts. Just to comment on some of the things that I've heard regarding the whether the CRC has teeth, as we heard the mayor say. It doesn't, but it does exist for a couple of key purposes. One, we are an appeals board. So the Police Review Board, when decisions get made by the PRB that an appellant does not agree with, they can bring it to the CRC, which is what we are. In a situation where we decide that what is going on, or the decision, sorry, that was made on the PRB we don't agree with based on our standard of review, then we go in and we can challenge that decision. Then it goes to a conference hearing with the chief of police for us to discuss it. And if we agree, then we move on those agreements. And if we continue to disagree, then it goes to city council for a final review. So that's like a very short picture for you all of how that system works and how it flows. In addition to hearing appeals, we're also responsible for advising on policy. And that's something that we're going to be working on more deeply in the coming weeks. We got organized at our last CRC meeting. We have one coming up July 1st. I put the Facebook page in the chat so you can go like it and go see the events. And I'm hoping we can stream them as well. And a big part of that is going to be, figuring out what are the demands that we're hearing on the streets, what are the demands from all of the different organizations that are weighing in on how we can achieve this reform, and then seeing how the CRC can advise on that. These work groups that we have, we just redefined them recently. So we've got a crowd control and use of force work group that is meeting this coming Wednesday at 5:30. We have a policy and outreach work group meeting this Wednesday at 6:30. And then we have a recurring audit work group, which is like doing audits of the independent police review, but we're actually talking about maybe changing that work group to be a recurring audit and a future of accountability kind of work group. So we can talk about, like, again, does the CRC have enough teeth? And if it doesn't, then how do we give it teeth? I bring up those work groups because all of those are open to the public. People, members of the public are encouraged to participate in the work groups. You can help us with this research. And so if you're looking for ways to get involved, those are 3 specific areas on the CRC that you can do that. And again, you can check out that page or look up our website. And yeah, I think that ultimately, I was talking with IPR recently, and I think that the PRB, the Police Review Board, could benefit from maybe a merge with the CRC. Maybe it is that we instead of having an appeals board like, of citizens, we just have more citizens on the PRB, because right now the police officers outweigh the citizens in those decisions. If we can shift that balance, because the PRB actually makes those initial decisions in a lot of ways. And that's something that just recently came up, and is something I'm thinking about, and I think could be a really good first step in having citizens give actual true independent review of the police, whereas right now the appeals board is just, it's one step removed, and by the time it gets to our place or to our board, so many other instances have happened and been, you know, either denied by the PRB, et cetera. So that's just one idea I'd wanted to throw out there that we're talking about. And again, I would encourage you all to come check out our work groups and get involved in that work if you're interested. I'm happy to answer any questions, but just wanted to give you a little bit of a background of what we're doing and how we operate. And you know, ultimately, we're trying to rise to the occasion, just like everybody else is. And I think that the more we can get people to be involved in our work groups would be super helpful for us, so that we can hear these voices directly, and you all can help us make those policy recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you, Candace. Appreciate it. Looking forward to meeting tomorrow and more collaboration between these groups. I think it's really important. We have about space for one or two more questions before we shift to the 19-point plan from Mayor Wheeler. So is there any final questions regarding either changes you'd like to see to PPB, the work that PCCEP is doing, the Portland Committee on Community Engaged Policing, or other things that you'd like to say? And we still do have Dr. Markeisha Smith and Senator Fredericks on the line. I see Laura has her hand raised. She will be our second to last question. Go ahead, Laura.
Hi, my name is Laura Seaton. Thanks so much for giving us the space to hear this, get involved, and do some great work and be a part of this process. Senator Fredericks, I just want to say I just read your opinion piece, and I think I'm going to be reading it about 10 or 15 more times. It was so well written and has so many great things to think about, and I really just wanted to say it's so impactful for me. So I wanted to say that. I wanted to also say that I am in this for the long haul, trying to figure out what I can do to be a part of the community and be a voice. I wanted to ask about the notion of officers living far away from Portland and not being in the communities that they police. You know what, I've kind of like taken all of my thoughts and put them, I've like taken everything. I'm like an empty slate. I'm gone from like abolitionist to, I was reformist, now I'm I don't even know where I'm falling, but I'm somewhere where I'm like, none of this makes sense anymore. It's harming people. And so I'm trying to figure out where I stand, and I'm trying to follow the organizations who have been doing this work for 30 or 40 years, sad to say. So I don't want to take up a lot of time. I just wanted to say the peace officer approach, I love what you said about that, Frederick. I think that's amazing. And Senator Fredericks, I'm sorry. Yeah, I've lost my train of thought now that I'm actually here. I just wanted to say that I find it very interesting that the Portland officers don't live in the communities that they police. I think that is so interesting that they're not invested in the communities that they police and that they live in. And I think it's hard to hold someone accountable if they don't get to go out in the community and have their face shown, so that we can hold them accountable for what they do, the atrocities that they've done to our communities. So I would say that I would like to see more officers actually live in the places that they police. I think
Laura,
that is
a number of folks would like that, but as I understand it, there was a court case way back before I was a reporter, as a matter of fact. I think there was a court case that said that the city could not require officers or employees to live in the city. And it was, as I understand it, it was an Oregon State Supreme Court case. I'll have to look it up a little bit more, but I remember, I remember this because I bought my house from a police officer who was happy that that the case had come through, and he and his family could now move out of Portland. That was his goal. So I remember that because of that. And then later on, there were also efforts to try to give incentives of one form or another, help with mortgages, a number of other things to get people to move in. Now the question has come up is how much, because of the high price of living in Portland, buying a home in Portland, whether police officers could in fact afford that or not. So that's one of the issues that we're dealing with. But as I understand it, it was a court case, an attempt at incentives, and now the concern about just the high price of housing and the high price of just buying a place. So we're going to be looking at that, because you're right. If you know, if you're treating the folks that you're working with as your neighbors, it's a different thing than if you're treating them as enemies or potential enemies or the bad guys that you're trying to catch. So just a second, sorry. I have somebody calling me and the phone was on. So if you can, that's one of the issues that we're going to be trying to deal with, but that's a longer range issue. That's not something that we can deal with right away, but it will be part of the mix.
Thank you.
If I may respond to, some years back, Chief Moose, and sorry, Senator Frederick, but Chief Moose tried to give the example of that when he became chief here in the city of Portland. And the goal was from the chief was to let people know in the Bureau that it was okay to live in the community when they feared the community so much. There was history where Officer Harry Jackson, him and I went on a ride along one time, and a group of young men were at Concordia, but the community, Concordia University over here, and they're off of in Northeast Portland here, and they got a lot of calls because they seen a group of African Americans, but the officers were afraid to approach them. So when they got there, when Officer Jackson got there, Harry just walked up to the group. Come to find out, they were celebrating their graduation. And the leadership out of there from Harry was to make sure that officers felt comfortable enough just to approach the African American youth or the groups. So there has been a lot said about how that it would be nice, Laura, for the officers too. But as Senator Frederick said, there's been a lot of scrimmage as well.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, Harry Jackson is a good example, but so was Chief Moose. He moved into the neighborhood. Everyone knew that he had moved there. He was able to talk with folks, and it made a difference. It made a difference so that you were no longer you were approaching folks and going to their barbecues because you were living in the neighborhood. That makes a big difference, and so we need to be able to address that in some form. I'm not sure how we're going to do it, but that's what we're going to try to do.
Well, I appreciate that. And just to end, I think what you said, I think having a list of what is our short-term, or not short-term, but what are our immediate goals, what are our intermediate goals, what are our long-term goals? Because I think I'm getting filled with all this information, and I definitely want to be advocating and doing the right thing. So knowing what I should be advocating for now, interim, long-term, I want to be doing that.
Great, thank you.
Appreciate that final question, and Senator Fredericks responding. Okay, that is going to conclude that portion of the open mic. We're going to 7 o'clock, and I'm going to turn it over to my co-chair, Andrew, for the second half of that.
Thank you. Elliot put a link to the mayor's plan in the chat earlier, but I'm just going to bump it there again so you all can see. This section of the agenda is really to solicit your feedback about the mayor's plan. So if you click through it there, you'll see the 19 points here. We already have one question about it from Dustin, and we can try to address that as best we can. But I'm just going to quickly run down the list, sort of briefly mention what each of them are, just in case you can't see that link, and then open it up to questions from everybody. So running through this quickly, redirect over $7 million from the Police Bureau and $5 million from other funds to communities of color. Call on criminal justice system partners to match the city's commitment and reinvest in communities of color. Call for a community-led review and re-envisioning of core patrol services convened by the Portland Committee on Community Engaged Policing, that's us. Hire a third party to review recruitment and retention strategies to ensure that the city's workforce reflects the community it serves. Support outreach and non-law enforcement responses like the Portland Street Response Pilot and the navigation team. Advocate for greater access to community-based behavioral health and harm reduction services located in communities of color. Decline the renewal of the intergovernmental agreement with TriMet, dissolving the PPB's transit division and putting transit officers back on patrol. Dissolving the gun violence reduction team. Removing police officers from schools, including dissolving the youth services division and the school resource officer program. Returning the equity and inclusion office to the chief's office. I imagine that they're talking specifically about the police bureau's equity and inclusion office, but maybe Dr. Smith can correct me if that is mistaken.
That's correct.
Require explicit council authorization for acquisition of military equipment. That's consistent with an executive order from President Obama. Create legislation enshrining the PCCEP, this board, making it a permanent community oversight body. Create local legislation for reforms to the use of consent searches in traffic stops. Ban corduroy constraints, that includes chokeholds as a method of control. Create a local racial profiling ban. This is the one we discussed earlier with the private right of action. Support Oregon's legislative people of color caucus's call for a special session to take up urgently needed reform legislation like that discussed today and carried by Senator Frederick. Support Oregon legislative people of color caucus in pursuit of legislation requiring the Attorney General to investigate officer-involved death or serious injuries of civilians. Support the legislative people of color caucus in pursuit of legislation ensuring the integrity of local discipline by prohibiting arbitrators from overturning disciplinary decisions. This is specifically the bill that Senator Frederick discussed. And lastly, support reform of federal qualified immunity doctrine. This last one is something that PCCEP recommended several weeks ago, and you can see that recommendation on our website. So I'll stop talking and open the floor to see folks' reactions to this list. If there are things that they like, if there are things that they don't like, obviously if there are additional pieces that they would like to see in here about what we can do at the local level to really change the way the whole system is structured. So I'll look for your hands and thank you for participating. Dustin, do you want to reiterate your question so that folks who might have come on late hear from you?
Yeah.
Thanks.
The question I had was about point number 15, where it says create local racial profiling ban with private right of action for intentional discrimination by law enforcement. My question was with the, like, what does that look like to create a racial profiling ban? Is that something that happens like before they're hired, the officers are hired, or is this something that as officers are on the job, like how does that get implemented? How does that look?
I don't know if anyone from the mayor's team is on, but I'll just mention one thing, which is that right now, under Oregon law, racial profiling is prohibited under a bill that passed and was signed into law in 2015. Similarly, at the federal level, there is a racial profiling ban that President Bush II put into place in the early 2000s. I think what the mayor is getting at here is there's no specific city prohibition on racial profiling by law enforcement. So what would happen here is that the council would pass that ban. And what's unique about this is that private right of action means that you as a citizen could go to the court to enforce that law, as opposed to having to rely on the district attorney or the attorney general to do it for you. So that private right of action extends your ability as a resident of the city to actually hold police accountable for living up to that rule. That's my understanding.
Andrew, if you don't mind, the 2015 and the 2017 racial profiling bills were mine. I was part of those. and I began introducing racial profiling bills in 2011. So that we could, when just, my first full session, continuing to do that. But you're right. I think that this brings it down to a much more granular level with the city. And the result of the studies and the tracking of racial profiling was that the city of Portland was noted for being the most disparate in terms of people being, Black people and Latino folks being pulled over. So it's an appropriate next step. We'll see how far you can go in terms of legally, but it's an interesting and appropriate next step.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, Senator. Christine B., I understand you have a question. Are you there, Christine? Did we lose you? Okay, we can't hear you, so we'll keep the floor open for others.
I'm sorry, can you hear me now?
There we go. Great.
I apologize.
Oh, no worries.
What I was saying was I have some specific questions about a number of items on the mayor's plan. I only got to about 6 before the questions and concerns got pretty overwhelming. I want to share the feedback that I feel like the amount of divestment and reinvestment that he is proposing seems wholly inadequate to the moment. And that I have some concerns about the proposals not being objectionable, or I'm sorry, objective and measurable. There seems to be a lot of vague language that is present. I don't know what advocate for greater access means. I don't know, that was number 6. He talked about in number 2, calling on criminal justice system partners. Again, I would like to have more specific understanding of who he's speaking to in these situations. What kind of reinvestment that would look like if he's going to reinvest in communities of color, how he is going to help delegate those reinvestments with the participation of those communities. I already asked Dr. Smith about my questions of the recruitment and retention of Black staff in the city and their experiences. But I just want to call that out again. I know as an employee of Portland Public Schools that there are efforts put into recruitment and very few that seem to be about retention that calls into question the culture of the system that drive our community members out of those spaces. I guess I have a lot of concerns about the vagueness, and I'm wondering if this is common, and this is just me coming to understand how vague these things are, or if anybody who is a member of the PCCEP can help me understand how these can be held to a standard of accountability when they seem very unclear. Thank you.
Thank you. And I see there's a question in the chat that also gets at this question of accountability. ZNAB writes, when developed, did these strategies include SMART goals? SMART being an acronym for a type of goal-making process. None of us work for the mayor, of course, who are on the committee, so we can't directly answer that question. And I don't know if there's anybody from City Hall who wants to try, but we'll certainly, if you want us to, we'll share these questions with the mayor and his team, because I do think that the feedback is extremely valuable, and they should hear about it. Elliot, go right ahead.
Yeah, just in response to the vagueness of some of the things on this document, Wheeler came up with this like literally overnight. I think he was under a lot of pressure by all the protesters to, come up with an action plan that could be done immediately. And so I think this reflects, that vagueness reflects that sort of, that this was done in a very short period of time. But I would also note that some of the things in here are not clear that they're actually reforms, like ban chokeholds. According to the chief of police, the current chief of police, and other people, chokeholds have been banned in Portland for a very long time. And it concerns me that a reform, that the mayor wouldn't know that. I'm assuming that the chief of police is correct, and from what I've heard, he is correct, but that the mayor would not know in proposing a reform that some of the things he's proposing as a reform are actually policy currently. So I think that there's a lot of work that needs to happen working with the city to clarify, especially the ones from the PCCEP's perspective. There are a couple that deal directly with us. Number 3, called for a community-led review and re-envisioning of core patrol services convened by PCCEP. I have no idea what that means, and the city, I don't think, has made it clear to PCCEP what that means. So I just want to echo what community members are saying, that there's a lot of questions. This document raises more questions than it answers.
Thank you, Elliot. Megan asked a question in the chat. If I wrote to PCCEP ahead of time with questions and thoughts on the plan, will they be conveyed to the mayor's office? Entirely up to you, Megan. We're happy. I think always one of the things that PCCEP has the potential to be is this mouthpiece for the community. We have direct lines to multiple members of the mayor's staff, and we can pass along feedback that we are receiving from you on this call, emails afterwards, etc. So if that's something that you want us to do, we are certainly happy to do that. Additional comments from folks on the mayor's plan or anything else you'd like to add? Laura.
Yes, hello, thank you. Also too, this money's being redirected, but not exactly sure towards what. Questions sprung to mind. I don't think it's detailed enough, which you've already addressed. Couple of questions. Someone raised the point last week that the Portland police do not wear body cams. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So is that something that would fit into one of these bullet points somewhere?
I don't believe so. The city was going to have a pilot of body cameras, but that has been pulled back.
Okay. That seems kind of important from the little I know. Also too, I'm not sure about Portland Police relationship with ICE, and I know we're a sanctuary city, so I don't think there's I'm not sure what the relationship is, but I feel like that's an important abuse of policing right there, and it's not addressed here. So maybe I'm not understanding our relationship with that agency, but can you help clarify that for me? Portland Police relationship.
I could actually speak to that because I've worked a lot on the sanctuary issue. So the Oregon as a state has a sanctuary law that prohibits employees from using resources of the state to facilitate or do immigration enforcement. In 2017, the city council passed a city ordinance or a city resolution that reiterated basically that same non-cooperation between all local officials, law enforcement officials, and ICE. Now, the problem, however, is that once someone gets arrested for any kind of low-level offense and gets booked into jail, that person's information, their fingerprints, gets entered into a database which is accessible by ICE. So really, we have this sanctuary policy in place, but we leave vulnerable lots of undocumented residents through an over-policing of communities of color on low-level things. So one of the ways around that is to push for moving the police away from that kind of broken windows policing, policing of low-level offenses as a way to protect undocumented residents.
Yes, well, I would like that. That would be great if that were included in this, in Wheeler's proposal somewhere. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. Anne, I see your hand raised if you'd like to chime in.
Thank you very much. I'm sorry, I'm on a phone. I don't know how to do Zoom on a phone very well. I would like to know if PCCEP can find out who is advising the mayor on mental health issues. The people, those of us who know mental health from many sides of issues, I don't think we're there. So the question is, who is advising him on this mental health? Is going to be a point. It'd be great if we were there. A second thing now, it's not part of the points, but the Portland Street response. The first proposal was to have a peer support specialist and a firefighter go, and suddenly 3 days before it got brought to City Hall, it got changed to a clinician. In Portland, Oregon, we don't have enough clinicians, or clinicians of color, I should say also, to do that kind of work. And it's very different. I've been picked up by police before in a mental health not so good state. And it's very different in my own experience. I'm sorry, I can only speak for my experience. I can't speak for that of others. And I understand someone had put in the comments I was centering. I'm sorry, I can only speak from my own experience. Is that when I am in a mental health state and people of authority come, a police or somebody, I am more likely not to tell the truth. I'm more likely not to want to come. I'm more likely to feel really like I don't want to be in the system. Now, if they had peer support specialists of color with the fire department, things like that, I hope that PCCEP would help promote that. Because I think if you're going to go out and do a different kind of what's quote unquote policing, it'd be great if we be part of it. And it's a mutual thing, not someone using powering down or powering up with it, but more of a mutual thing. And then we can work on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Anne. Any additional feedback? Again, either on the mayor's list or any other ideas that you want to workshop here. As a reminder, we will be having our regularly scheduled full PCCEP meeting a week from Tuesday, and we'll have a number of recommendations from different subcommittees that will be up for a vote that day. But we're always looking for new ideas and ways to move the needle. So please don't be shy about anything that you want to discuss in this time.
We have a question in the chat, Andrew. Should we respond to that? From Sarah.
Sure. So I'll read it here. This is from Sarah Iannarone. Sarah, thank you for joining us. We know that you are very busy running for mayor, having your hat in the proverbial arena, so thank you. Your question is, I would like to know PCCEP's position on the police brutality taking place in the streets each night, shooting demonstrators with rubber-coated bullets, etc., and especially since at least 4 journalists have been either beaten or arrested. Forgive me if you took a position on this and I missed it. So it was last Sunday, that we voted on and approved a ban on the use of tear gas by the Portland Police Bureau. And I'll make sure that that link is in the chat for you to review. We've also had a number of discussions with the police, really dating back to the start of PCCEP, about the use of force, providing them feedback on their use of force policy. We'll have another recommendation again, a week from Tuesday at our regular full board meeting, actually 2 recommendations about use of force in different contexts, the goals of which is to try to reduce the likelihood of force being used on our streets, force that we know historically has been used in a disproportionate way. So while there's certainly much more to be done, and we're, again, like I said, we're always open for ideas, this is something that we have tried to advance during the last year and a half. And I'll get that link in the chat for you.
Just to add that it wasn't only tear gas, it was chemical agents, the acoustic devices, as well as flashbang grenades. So trying to get a sort of wide variety of the ways in which protesters have been silenced over the past few weeks.
Yes, that's right. Thank you for that, Elliot. Megan. Hi, Megan. The floor is yours. We can't hear you if you're trying to speak. Okay.
Megan commented and said, sorry, skip ahead.
Yeah.
I'll fix it.
The floor is open once again to others.
While someone has something to speak, maybe it's worth talking about what happened at City Council in the last meeting, because I think it was confusing for those of us who were listening, and confusing, because there was a lot of back and forth. So if there's no one else who's asking a question, I mean, the way I understood what happened was that there were a series of amendments that were offered, which moved from the $7 million that Mayor Wheeler advanced in his reforms, in agreement with Commissioner Hardesty, to increase that to $15.6 million. Commissioner Udaley ended up voting no because, as she argued, it didn't go far enough. And so the budget did not pass in the last meeting because it was an emergency meeting. But that is going to come back to the City Council on Wednesday. And I think the expectation is the amendments as proposed by Joanne Hardesty and Mayor Wheeler will pass. So it increased from 7 million to a cut of 15.6 million from the Police Bureau, and not close to the 15+ million people were asking for, but there was some movement from 7 to 15 million. And I raise this just because one of the recommendations PCCEP passed last Sunday was precisely on moving resources away from the Police Bureau. So there was some movement on that, although not to the extent that many in the community wanted.
Thank you, Elliot. Yeah, and this was 15 million on top of what each city bureau was already facing, which was a mandatory, I think, 5.5% cut. So that was sort of 12 million and an additional 15 million for the Police Bureau itself, and we'll see that budget come up again this week. So appreciate that. Megan, I see your hand again.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, thank you.
Oh, okay, sorry about that. Yeah, I wrote in an email earlier, but I thought maybe it would be helpful, since no one else is speaking, just to share some of my thoughts and questions. My overall thoughts of the plan is that it seems like necessary but not sufficient, and I keep hearing a lot a lot of officials at city and state level saying, this is only the beginning and more is coming. And I just want to just keep encouraging PCEP to push on these things. I had a question about, there's number 5, the supporting outreach and non-law enforcement responses like Portland Street Response pilot. I would love to see a significant increase in funding for something like Portland Street Response or any entity like that, that it could become not just a pilot, but a citywide force that could grow to be something that's on par with the police force, where we have, social workers, mental health care workers, and other support workers who are available on demand in the same way that police are. So that was something that I've been thinking about. And then I had I'm glad to see that they want to enshrine the PCEP into a permanent thing. I think that's great. And then I just wanted to add to that, like, is there a way that we were talking about the CRC maybe having a way for them to have more teeth and more power, but I'd also like to see PCEP have more power. Like what kinds of things, and I don't know what those are, but what kinds of things could PCEP perhaps be able to do if they had more power? So there's that, and then just one more thing. I think Dr. Smith is still on. I saw her before. Oh, she just left. Darn. Because I was just gonna the number 10, talking about the Equity and Inclusion Office. I just had a question about that. It may have been mentioned, but I'm just curious about the history of why were they not in with the chief's office, did they get pushed out somehow? And if there's some history around that, because it was a confusing thing to me. I didn't really understand that. And then I thought that they were like a citywide in all departments, and Dr. Smith spoke to that, like she's responsible for all city departments. So like it's not just going to be involvement with the chief's office. Is going to continue to be a citywide office, correct? Those are my questions and thoughts.
Yes. So on the question of the office, this is the Equity and Inclusion Office within the Police Bureau, as opposed to the one that Dr. Smith oversees, which is the citywide office. So that's the distinction. I don't know a lot about the history of the Bureau's office, but I just put a link in the chat to the Equity and Inclusion Plan that the Bureau publishes every year. On the question of PCEP and sort of codifying PCEP, I'm going to kick it to Lakiana because he's been doing a lot of work on this, and he can talk a little bit about some of the things that we've been kicking around.
Thanks for taking me in there. I was hoping you saw my hand. Yeah, so having PCEP codified by the city is something that we have wanted for a long time. For those of you who are not aware, the committee is currently only is based within the settlement agreement between the city and the Department of Justice, but that agreement is set to expire in June once they've reached a year of maintaining substantial compliance, which is an entirely different conversation in and of itself. And so the mayor's office had reached out to us to me specifically about recommendations of what we would like to see if PCEP is codified based off of what's currently in the PCEP plan and other things that we wanted. And so we're going to use these 9 points that I will read out, and we will make a formal recommendation, as Andrew had mentioned, at the June meeting. But those include, number 1, allowing PCEP to select and appoint its own members to the board. Currently, we can make recommendations, and then the mayor formally makes those recommendations. And he has not gone against any of our recommendations so far. But to fully allow PCCEP to be an autonomous body or an independent body, and I think that there's some ways that could be done. That could either be done by the committee itself, or maybe have some input from community organizations. But at least currently, I like the idea of having the committee itself be able to appoint members based off what it needs. PCCEP have a role in engaging community members to review new cohorts of officers. So whenever a new cohort of officers would be, is going to be instated into the Bureau, it would kind of be like jury duty where PCCEP would then find community members who would then have like a special session with the officers and be able to talk with them and really at one point welcome, but also vet the officers to make sure that they're, really ready to serve the community. For PCCEP, number 3 is PCCEP have a role in hiring all top-level command staff, including the police chief, all the assistants, and the deputy chiefs. We just had an incident a couple weeks ago. Well, I mean, you just seen the last 2 weeks. You had an assistant chief who left, and that he was immediately replaced by another officer in the command staff that left the entire staff white, and then the Chief Resch resigned, and then was replaced with Chief Lavelle, who's an African American. But there really wasn't any process, community process in all of that. And I understand that, decisions had to be made quickly, but in a non-crisis situation, especially when you look at the one with Assistant Chief Ryan Lee leaving, that wasn't a crisis at the time. And so having us be a part of that process, I think would be great. PCCEP having a spot at the negotiation table as a community representative during contract negotiations between the Portland Police Association and the city. PCCEP being embedded into the universal review process for all PPB recommendations that impact the community. So the universal review process is a process that the Portland Police Bureau has where anytime that they make a new policy change, it has to be reviewed universally by the community. So there's like 2 periods of like 60 days where community members can give input. And so we would add a third layer into that, was where every policy that has any impact on community would have to then come before PCCEP. So then that embeds a third layer into it and really allows things to come before everybody. Clarify and strengthen language around PCCEP's responsibility, PPB's responsibility to consider our recommendations. Currently, they have to take them into consideration, but there's not really something that says you have to take this recommendation. And again, we don't want to, we're not asking for that, like every recommendation you say we have to take, but clarifying and strengthening that language where necessary so that, there is some understanding that when we make a recommendation that they're not just looked at and then tossed aside. Compel officer testimony, which is something that IPR might currently have, whereas IPR is Independent Police Review, might currently have or is trying to ask for. Number 8, PCCEP having power in disciplining officers. And then number 9, as you guys can all see, we work incredibly hard in increasing our PCCEP stipend from $120 to $500.
Thank you very much, Lakiana. And we're going to have more time to talk about exactly this subject, as Lakiana mentioned, at our full board meeting.
I'll put them up on Twitter. I know that was really, really fast to read through those. So if you want,
good, yeah, we'll put them on Twitter, and we'll get them on the PCCEP website as well in advance of that Tuesday meeting. I recognize we're close to time, but we have 2 hands raised, and I want to get to both of them, so I'll do them in the order in which they raise their hand. Jocelyn, if you want to go first, and then Pastor Weisner, if you want to follow.
Hi, thank you for your time. Can you hear me? I wanted to reiterate Megan's concern about the equity office. I'm a volunteer with Portland Cop Watch, and we were also not aware that the equity office had been moved out from the chief's office. So just wanted to reiterate that. We were also interested in any clarity to issue number 13 about the creation of local legislation to reform the use of consent searches and traffic stops. If we could have more information around that, that would be helpful. And I just wanted to do a quick reminder to folks that they can comment on the crowd control directives through tomorrow, that the deadline on that is June 15th. And I'll be dropping the link yet again in the chat conversation, but just that it's important for everybody's voice on that. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Pastor?
I just wanted to make a statement on some of the recommendations that's strengthening the PCEPs. On one of the thoughts there, maybe Senator Fair may remember as well, but there should be something already in place about sitting on the command staff assessment board. I was one who sat on the assessment board when it moved toward the promotion from assistant chief to chief office during the Rosie Sizer term and when she was serving. So there's a lot of language there that's already in the, and to me, that's one of the things that I have a difficult problem with, where that they act like a lot of the things are not there in their new suggestions, but it's already in place. A lot of that's right there, and all we need to do is probably just bring it back and somewhere find it.
I can't tell you. I don't know that the details on that. I remember that that was set up, although but I think that was part of the DOJ a settlement that they had to do more with it. So I think it was brought up initially and then had to come. They needed to come back. So I would check and see whether it's still in place. I do not know that. Sorry.
And I just say that because, again, a lot of the work that PCEP is great work that they're doing from the very beginning is a lot of things that were set in place. I'm not sure because I haven't been involved for a while now. Many of you might already know that I was part of the AMA that was working and helped bringing in the Department of Justice, but also took the time to work and learning through the difficult times being a part of the Bureau and going through the Citizen Academy. And I do know that Kevin Modique, the community policing, Chief Moves, others, made sure that we were really in community policing. And so, yeah, I think there's some kind of language there, definitely. Thank you.
Thank you, Pastor. And thank you to everybody who tuned in tonight and for your thoughts, for your activism, for your advocacy, for your work. It's been a very difficult time, and it's been great to be together apart with all of you tonight, as it has been the last couple of weeks. I'm going to say one more time, we've got our full board meeting for June coming up a week from Tuesday. That will be virtual again, of course, and you can read more about the agenda for that, as well as get the Zoom information on the PCEP website. Lakiani, any lasting thoughts before we send everybody off for their evenings?
No, I appreciate people for speaking their truth. I don't know if you mentioned having the steering or the co-chairs just maybe drop their meeting, next meeting link or agenda in the chat, because we probably don't have enough time to go through all of them right now. But I would suggest that, and just appreciate people for sharing their truth and listening. And I know for some of y'all that might have been uncomfortable or different, or we did things a different way or held space for people in a way that might have felt different, but that uncomfortability is what will allow us to grow. So I appreciate that. And for our staff that have been helping behind the scenes, working to make sure all this went off, appreciate that.
Peace, everybody.
Thank you.
Good night.
Take care.
Thank you, everyone.